Nano Machine by Hanjo Wheelia. Chapter 406. To the North. Part 1. Ganga Mountains, located on the border of Sichuan. In the Ganga Mountains, known for its steepness, there was a famous place on its cliffs. It was called Death Valley. It was named as such because of the rapid currents which kept coming from upstream. Once swept away by them, no one could survive. Swoosh! With the heavy rain, the valley was more ferocious than ever. A fierce battle was taking place on the steep cliff of Death Valley that no one would choose to climb. Clang! Clang! The sound of weapons and sharp clashes cut through the air. In the aftermath of the fierce confrontation, the surrounding cliffs were all devastated. Swoosh! Even though it was hard to open the eyes during the heavy downpour, dozens of people with bamboo hats were looking at the confrontation which was happening before their eyes. Among them, there were those who stood out. Two old men and one middle-aged man with a scar on his face. They were so different from the others that the water didn't even touch their body. Among them, an old man with white beard and gold eye patch on his left eye watched the battle in amazement. He sure is a great kid. How can he be that confident when facing the Blade Lord? Right, I now know why the forces of evil and Hang Yen had a hard time and ended up in a civil war. The bald old man next to him agreed. The young man they were talking about was battling against the Blade Lord, head of the Blade God's 6 martial clan. He was doing a fairly great job against the man who was known to be invincible. Even so, it isn't much of a fight. The middle-aged man with a scar spoke to the old men. He pointed to someone and said, "Our Blade Lord is fighting without moving one step from there. No matter how good the opponent is, it is like throwing an egg at a rock." As the middle-aged man said, the Blade Lord didn't move a single step since the battle started. The only thing which was moving was his right arm, which was wielding his sword. He even blocked some of the attacks with just one hand. Maybe because we are getting old, we might not know much. But to be able to move like that at that age is great in its own way. As the old man said, the opponent was a young man in his early 30s. He was skilled enough to possess a title within Wulin. Even in the middle of the battle, after realizing that he had no chance, he was still giving it his all. The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed at something. Wulin is wide. However, he is certainly competent for someone of his age. It was understandable that the forces of evil suffered a setback because of him. It was said that the young man was a good strategist who split the forces of evil into two, which had never happened before, and if he stuck around, he would have gained a nice title in the forces of evil. Ah, he is out of luck. To meet Blade Lord before even experiencing power. The young man was flustered at the sudden appearance of Blade Lord. Due to him, the young man missed his chance to kill Gong Yun, Hang Yen's right-hand man. And this man was a monster. He was full of confidence as he managed to kill numerous people with his martial arts, but this monster in front of him didn't even budge. Is he really human? Even Hang Yen, one of the 5 strongest warriors, wasn't like this. Hang Yen too had to fight to stay alive. But this monster seemed different. I need to decide. He thought of giving up and trying to run away, but it would be impossible with all the cliffs and the water below. At that time, Blade Lord, who had been silent till then, spoke. "Is this all you got? TCH. The young man's face distorted at the provocation. He couldn't even come up with an excuse. All he managed to do was cut the bamboo hat on his opponent by a little. "I watched as you seemed interesting. You used a total of 38 martial arts." It was shocking how accurately he spoke out the number of martial arts which were used. To confuse the opponent, the young man had purposely used multiple martial arts one after another, but for it to get noticed. "Are there no other styles you know?" The young man didn't say anything. That was an answer. Now that all his cards were exposed, he couldn't even respond to Blade Lord. Then there is nothing more to see. What? That was when something amazing happened. Shoo! The man put away his sword. It seemed like he was willing to let his young opponent go, when he suddenly began to gather tremendous energy, sword chi, which took the shape of a sword. A sword of sword chi. That is? The young man was bewildered at what he saw, but then the sword chi turned into an air sword aiming for his chest. Puck! Quack! The eyes of the young man screamed in agony. He was shocked looking at the sword chi, but to see it come flying at his chest was even more shocking. Invisible sword? Just the invisible sword was shocking enough, but then he used it as an air sword. Which could only mean one thing: the monster he had been fighting was a divine master. His intuition about not having a chance to win turned out to be true. Quack! Stagger! Having his chest pierced, he staggered a couple steps as he fell into the river below. Ah! Seeing that, people who were watching the battle came to the edge of the cliff to see what happened. Looking down, they saw that he fell off the cliff and drowned in the water currents. Hook! Among them, a middle-aged man in a red coat couldn't help but shudder. As if piercing the heart wasn't enough, the man had fallen into the Death Valley and his body couldn't be recovered. The man in the red coat approached the young man's opponent and spoke in a pleased way. Indeed, the Blade Lord has reached the level of God. You treated that monster like a child. At that, the middle-aged man with a scar came in between the two. Like a spokesman for Blade Lord, he said, "Nothing is impossible for our Lord." The true identity of the man in the red coat was Gong Yun, Hang Yen's right hand, and an official of the forces of evil. "Did you say you were Slaughter Blade Master? If our master hears this news, he won't be able to contain his joy." "I am glad to hear that. We did what you requested. I hope you hold up your end of the deal." From their conversation, it looked like the Blade God's 6 martial clan and forces of evil had come to a deal. And the contents of Gongyun's words revealed it. "Of course we will. Now that we have eliminated that damn bastard, if the other remnants can be taken down, this alliance will proceed as promised." An agreement between the Blade God's 6 martial clan and the forces of evil. From Gongyun's point of view, Blade Lord was someone with extreme power, someone he wanted as an ally. Seeing his strength, he was glad he came ahead. Gongyun was delighted with it. He even tried to invite them into the stronghold of forces of evil, but they refused. Swoosh! Blade Lord, who had the bamboo hat, looked down at the valley water in the heavy rain. He looked through the hat. Since the invisible sword was made from his internal energy, he felt the man's heart stop. But something felt wrong. What is this feeling? What is this? It was worrying. For that very reason he did not talk with Gong Yun and used Slaughter Blade Master as his proxy. "Blade Lord." A man with a bandaged face approached him. Blade Lord looked at him with a puzzled expression, as he hurriedly knelt on the rain-drenched ground. "What is it?" There was a problem in the North Sea Ice Palace. Most of them were destroyed. It seems like only 2 masters and 1 from the spirit unit are alive. Goo! Ike! As soon as he heard those words, intense energy surged from his body. He knew that the North Sea Ice Palace news was supposed to come, but he didn't expect it to be that horrible on his ears. This time even that demon god hadn't interfered. Swoosh! Clench! Quack! When he reached out, the bandaged man's body was forcibly dragged into his hand. He was angry because the mission was easy to get done. Judging from how he was grabbing the bandaged man's neck, one wrong word and his neck would be snapped. Why did they fail? There had to be a good reason. Fortunately, there was a reasonable excuse this time. Quack, the dragon turtle, Quack, wasn't dead. Contrary, it, Qua, has 4 heads. The news about 4 heads made Blade Lord's eyes light up. This was unexpected. According to their gathered information, it was supposed to be a 2-headed dragon which had been trapped in the ice for years. However, as if being alive wasn't enough, it even grew in power. Splash! Cough! As Blade Lord released his neck, the man in bandages coughed and gasped for air. A dragon with 4 heads. Even a 3-headed dragon was called a walking disaster. Thinking, Blade Lord opened his mouth. Slaughter Blade Master. Yes. Sangdal, who was close by, came on order. And the Lord gave him an order. You and 20 more men, bring me that dragon turtle spirit core and blood. The man in bandages coughed at the number of people. TW 20 people, that is half of the spirit squad. Well, those people are used for this kind of thing, it won't be a problem. Although much stronger than others, they were trained to be used for such situations. Even so, it was better to send inexperienced ones than send in others who will end up turning into a worthless sacrifice. Will that be enough? Would a little more be fine? I heard that it was sealed in the Pobalap Palace and is still alive. There was a reason why the Blade God's 6 martial clan came to Sichuan. Their real goal was the Pobalap Palace. A cold vice came out of Blade Leader's mouth. Since when did you start voicing your opinion to me? Realizing what he had done, Sangdal got on his knees. Ah, not at all. I obey the orders of the Lord. Looking down, the Blade Lord spoke. Don't worry. I'll take care of the Pobalap Palace. Headquarters of Forces of Justice in Yulin. More than 400 people were gathered in 5 rows at the north gate. Divided into 3 groups. 100 or so warriors were in light brown robes, they were elite warriors of the Huangbo clan. Another group of 100 men, wearing thick white robes, were warriors of the Moyong clan, led by Moyong Kong. Finally, the group of 200 men, who were covered in thin armor with the word Shadow on their back, were the Blade Shadow Forces, one of the 4 major armed groups of Yulin. Thank you for the support. Kong Soa, the leader of the Black Shadow Forces, was moving ahead with his horse. He took the lead thanks to Moyong Kong, who was a couple steps behind. Moyong Kong, who opposed the decision, joined in on their plan. I would like to thank my father. Moyong Kong didn't want to go over there because of the dragon turtle being alive, but being from the north, he couldn't refuse the request of Imak, who asked him to accompany the troops. Ah! I am forever grateful to the ones coming to our help. I sincerely thank the warriors of Yulin for accepting this request of ours. At that time, Dan Jizong, an envoy from North Sea Ice Palace, who was on a horse beside them, spoke to them. His face was full of pride. He was afraid that they wouldn't accept his request, but in the end the Yulin didn't just dispatch warriors, but also the elite among them. Defeating the dragon turtle is important, but the fact that the Blade God's 6 martial clan is aiming for it, means they are planning something. At Kong Soa's words, the leaders unified their opinion. They decided to help the North Sea Ice Palace in defeating the dragon turtle without suffering any major damage. If your older brother comes out of the building, he might praise Kong Soa's spirit. A pretty woman's voice came from the right side of Kong Soa. The woman was Jigul Sohi, one of the 3 beauties in Jianghu and the strategist of Yulin. In addition to the 3 armed groups, 20 men of the Jigul clan had come. They were experts in seals, and were brought along to see if it was possible to reseal the spirit beast one again. There is no need for such things. Kong Soa responded coldly at Jigul Sohi's words. At that, she smiled bitterly. Still like that. It was because she knew very well that Yun Buso and Kong Soa, or the children of Imak, were never on good terms with each other. They were like water and oil. She wondered if they would get close if Yun Buso wasn't so perfect, but Kong still seemed to hate his brother. He didn't even like his fiancée, Jigul Sohi, and shouted to the warriors who were behind without even sparing a glance at her. Each hour is important. I'd like to make sure that everyone is prepared beforehand. For the journey to the North Sea, you won't get very much rest. So be mindful of your bodies and condition. Yes. 400 warriors of Yulin shouted vigorously as they passed through the North Gate and began to march for the North Sea. Chapter 407. To the North. Part 2. The New Academy of Demonic Cult. Thud. Baekhyun, the envoy from North Sea Ice Palace, showed his earnestness by hitting his forehead on the floor. Please help us. Everyone in the room was in deep thought. He didn't miss the opportunity when he revealed that the owner of the identity slate was Chun Inji, the former lord of the demonic cult. Despite the situation, Baekhyun thought that seeing the identity slate, the new lord would surely come to help them. Please help us out, like your former lord did. At that moment, Chun Yeon's voice entered Baekhyun's ears, who had his head on the ground. I have a question for you. Baekhyun raised his head slightly. Yes? According to Wang Jing, the North Sea signed an alliance agreement with the Yulin forces. Why didn't you ask them for help? The North Sea and the demonic cult rarely interacted, and that was the truth. But they were doubting it because of Baekhyun's behavior. And when Chun Yeon pointed it out, he was too flustered to answer. I am grateful that you brought us news about our former lord. However, I don't understand why the North Sea sent one envoy to us expecting that we would trust the words of one person. Besides, this isn't even a formal request. Maybe we look easy to him. Of course, he knew that such a request would be a bit unreasonable in normal circumstances, but he thought that since he brought the slate along, the demonic cult would help him. Do you think that any man from the palace can come down to Jeonhu alone, without an official request, and ask us to dispatch people just because we are loyal to our former lords? Baekhyun's face hardened at those words. Wuong. Huh? Baekhyun's body, which had been lying face down, was raised by force. Shocked, he tried to rebel against the force which was raising him in the air, but he couldn't even move. Chun Yeon spoke to the man, who was flustered. Since I am no idiot, I can make 2 guesses. You came here by yourself thinking you can represent the North Sea. Gulp. Baekhyun gulped his saliva with a nervous face, while Chun Yeon continued to speak to him. Maybe you judged that there is an enemy inside, so you are asking for our help personally. This is not an official request from the North Sea, right? Baekhyun couldn't help but be shocked. He only talked about the related events to the dragon turtle and what happened in the North Sea Ice Palace, but that information was omitted. His intuition isn't normal. Indeed, he was the lord of the forces which moved the Wulin. He heard the rumors, but he thought that they were exaggerated because of the age of the lord. However, Baekhyun was wrong. I can't hide it anymore. If he guessed so much, a couple more guesses, and the lord would probably figure out everything. Baekhyun nodded and apologized. I never meant to deceive you. I couldn't tell you right away, because I was scared that the lord would turn down my request right away. From Baekhyun's point of view, there was nothing else he could do. The reason he asked for the help from demonic cult alone was because it was a matter related to the internal problems of the North Sea Ice Palace. He couldn't just reveal such matters to outsiders, casually. Explain everything. I am the prince of the North Sea Ice Palace. I knew it. Hu Bong couldn't hold back his words. Baekhyun wasn't an ordinary man from the palace. He was the prince who would lead the North Sea Ice Palace in the future. Listening to how Chun Yeon was on guard, the others had roughly understood his identity. I am amazed at the wisdom of the Lord. Please forgive my rudeness. That was pretty bold of you. If you hadn't given me that slate of our former lord, I would have made you pay a considerable price. Crap. He spoke casually, but goosebumps rose on Baekhyun's body. That jade was acting as a shield for him. Baekhyun knew that if he spoke any more lies, his life would be in danger, so he decided to reveal everything. I have no intention of hiding it anymore. As the Lord guessed, the formal envoy went to request Yulin. Baekhyun revealed everything. Hubong couldn't hide his dissatisfaction at those words. From what he said, it was likely they wanted help from both the demonic cult and Yulin forces. The problem was that the official request was only for Yulin, so if they went to the North Sea by listening to this man, it would end up as a problem from the demonic cult. At that time, Ko Wonger pointed out a fact. That is strange. If you are the Prince of North Sea Ice Palace, aren't you the Deputy King? Right. In case of an accident, it was normal procedure for the prince to take over the position as a proxy and lead the office. At that, Baekhyun bit his lip trying to calm the anger and spoke. I am not. Now, the deputy king of the palace isn't me, but a person named Dan Jushin, my second uncle. Second uncle? At those words, Chun Yo-won's eyes lit up. If so, it meant that the current head of the palace was someone else. Judging from Baekhyun's reaction, there must have been an internal conflict in the palace. This attracted Chun Yo-won's attention. Excluding everything you said, you are currently asking for our cult's help, when you have no authority in your hand. Chun Yo-won asked Dan Baekhyun in a stern tone. That, it can be thought of as such, but there was nothing I could do. There are numerous spies in the main palace. Spies? Are you talking about the Blade God 6 martial clan? Yes. In addition to those who died in the underground, Baekhyun was certain that there were spies of the Blade God 6 martial clan everywhere in the palace. The most suspicious ones were Dan Jushin and his followers. Hearing that the king met with an unfortunate accident and the dragon had been released, the first action he took was to convene a meeting and be appointed as the deputy king of the palace. He took advantage of the crisis rather than devising measures. At that time, I was unconscious because of the wounds I suffered, only if I was fine. TCH. Taking advantage of the release of the dragon turtle, he had himself appointed as the deputy king in the palace, and was delegated all the powers as he gathered all the powerful people in the palace. Although it was a moment of crisis, Dan Jushin was being respected as a hero by the people of North Sea Ice Palace. While Baekhyun was unconscious because of his injuries, everything had already been decided. As if they were all waiting for that moment. It is a situation which raises suspicion, but maybe he could have done it without the help of spies. Ko Wonger asked. At that, Baekhyun raised his head and answered in anger. If that person really wanted the position of king based on his skills, maybe my father and I would be able to understand. But he, a person who is supposed to be my father's brother, took advantage of a crisis and took power. If something like that happens in your cult, would you dismiss it as a simple power struggle? At that, Ko Wonger went silent. Baekhyun's words weren't wrong. He kept saying that his uncle took advantage of the crisis, but there was a high probability that he thoroughly colluded with the Blade God 6 martial clan. They had plotted things the same way everywhere. And the three elders are known to be the right hands of my uncle. They and my uncle were all in favor of bringing in those bombs from the Blade God 6. Enough. Chun Yo-won asked him to stop talking. When he said that without hearing the entire story, Baekhyun turned restless. Chun Yo-won spoke to him. I don't think there is any need to hear more. Then? Well, people of the demonic cult will head to the North Sea to secure the safety of the former lord. Baekhyun's face swelled with happiness at the good news, which came out from Chun Yo-won's words. From looking at how Chun Yo-won acted, it seemed like they were going to send Baekhyun back, but now he was willing to help. Thank you. However, the happy feelings ended quite fast. Let us sign a contract here. Huh? Baekhyun doubted his ears at the sudden words of a contract. He thought that since they would need their former lord, they would help, but the new turn of events were unexpected. The safety of your former Lord of the Sky Demon Order is at stake, don't get me wrong. What? If we head to the North Sea without an official request, we will undoubtedly face backlash from the Yulin and the North Sea soldiers. WL. If the life of our former Lord cannot be secured or identified, our cult will choose to not move. It was an undeniable fact. If the former Lord, Chun-Inji's body wasn't left behind by the dragon turtle, it would be like the demonic cult had interfered in the matters of another palace without an official request. No one could point fingers at the cult when getting rid of the dragon turtle, but once the matter gets solved, people are bound to question their reasons. A justification. Baekhyun understood. He had no idea how the current deputy king would act. But there was one problem. Lord. Even though I can write down the contract, I hold no authority. The deputy king of the palace might ignore this. Would you still like this? It doesn't matter. Huh? Really? Write it down. Baekhyun was puzzled at Chen Yuan, who spoke as if he didn't care about it. However, realizing that Chen Yuan could change his mind any moment, Baekhyun took the brush on the table. He looked up at Chen Yuan. What kind of contract should I write? Simple one. All you need is to put down 3 conditions. 3? Baekhyun frowned. He didn't know that there were going to be 3 conditions. He was anxious, but he decided to give in and listen. First, the core and blood of the dragon turtle will belong to the Sky Demon Order, who will kill it. You mean, the cult will kill it? Yes. That was understandable. If they killed it, they would have the right to take it. Of course, if they joined up with the North Sea Ice Palace to kill it, there could be problems. The cult was indeed risking their life to help the North Sea, a place which had nothing to do with them, so this condition felt acceptable. Second, after the dragon turtle is eradicated, break the agreement between North Sea Ice Palace and Yulin forces. Huh? That is a buy. While he was still flustered, Chen Yuan continued the third condition. Third, in place of the cancelled agreement, the North Sea will make a new one. Write these 3 things very clearly. At Chen Yuan's words, Baekhyun was speechless. His first condition felt right, but the second and third weren't something he could decide on his own. If we sign the contract with the said conditions, we will head to the North Sea right away. Wait a minute. Lord. The contents of the contract that you mentioned aren't things I can. You don't have to worry about that. Huh? You will soon be inaugurated as the king. Baekhyun trembled at the sudden words which came out of Chen Yuan's mouth. The feeling of embarrassment he felt had changed. Chen Yuan's lips raised into a smile and spoke to Baekhyun. You decide. King Dan. After many hours passed, Chen Yuan came out of the guest room and gave orders to his subordinates. Call the 6 swords right now. We will depart. Yes. At that moment, the demonic cult's expedition to the North Sea was confirmed.